We're going to start this puppy up. Clear? Prop?
And welcome back to Building Your Affordaplane. We've finally reached the moment where we're ready to start building our wings. And right behind me is the best part of all. Our friend Steve, who we've met various times throughout this series, has created a fixture or jig for making the wings super easy to put together and to keep them all straight and level and in line and to know where all the parts and pieces go. So we're going to take a moment describing what it takes to put together this fixture. And the best part is that it uses your existing workbench. You don't have to build a new workbench, no sawhorses, nothing like that. So let's get started and talk about how to set up this wing fixture, thanks to Steve. Here is a bird's-eye view of the fixture. Basically, you take your 16-foot workbench that you've been using and clear off 12 of the 16 feet. So that was the most challenging part for me. All my stuff, tools, parts, and pieces is jammed on the last 4 feet. So it's probably time to organize some of that. Anyhow, you clean off 12 feet of your workbench, which of course is 4 feet wide, and you need to add 2 strips of wood 12 feet long. Now, I happen to have 12-foot pine boards. You can use plywood. Now, obviously, plywood doesn't come in 12-foot lengths, so you would butt an 8-foot piece up to a 4-foot piece, and that would work perfectly fine. And of course, we need 2 of these. How wide do they have to be? Approximately 6 inches at minimum. Mine were 11 inches, but that's just because that's what I had on hand. So at least 6 inches wide, 12 feet long, 1 for each side of the table. As you can imagine, this is going to become the outer limits, the outer boundaries of the front and rear spar. And let's go a little bit closer and take a look at how these are configured. Looking down the length of the table, we notice that it overhangs by about 3 inches. Not exactly, but very close to 3 inches on each side. And that's why I recommended minimum of 6 inches, because you want enough space to tack it down to the edge of the table. If it's wider, that's even nicer. And along the edge, occasionally, we have some strips that we tacked on the edge, and this is to keep the spar from rolling off the edge. And then at the very end, we have another strip, and this defines our greatest limit, or the end of the wing, the end of the spar. On the opposite side is exactly the same thing. The board overhangs roughly 3 inches over the edge, and there are strips every so often to keep the other spar from rolling off of the edge. What is most critical, and this is a one-time setup, is the distance from the edge of one board that overhangs about 3 inches to the edge on the other side, which hangs about 3 inches over. And this will define how far the spars are apart. And of course, that distance is in your plans. It's approximately 54 inches. However, that's an approximation. We'll talk later about getting that exactly correct. Once these are affixed to the table, and you want to simply screw them down only after you confirm that the distance you choose from one edge of the board to the other is identical all the way down. In other words, that the boards are exactly parallel to each other the entire distance. Not difficult to do. You simply use a tape measure and confirm that you got them separated just right, and then you can screw them both down to the table. Another factor is we want to make sure that both boards are equally the same distance and line up with each other. In other words, that they aren't skewed one further down than the other. And then we're going to start marking stations. Looking at your plans, there's one at 5 inches. And at 5 inches, we'll draw a very accurate line and then do the same thing down at the other end. And then we'll progress down. The next one is at the 53 mark. If you look at your plans, you'll be able to see why these numbers are important. And again, we want to make them very accurate and identical to the other side so that they're perfectly in line. And then we have another one at 101. And our last one is at 140. And of course, those are made along the opposite side. Now, one set of final markings we want to make on our jigs are the following. Now, we're looking at the inboard end of the wing. This is where it connects to the fuselage. And what I'm going to show you applies to both sides, both spars. So once we do it here, you need to do it for the other spar. We're going to have 3 sleeves, 3 inner sleeves for strengthening that's going to be slid inside of the spars at the following locations. Now, right at the very inboard end of our wing, we're going to have our first sleeve. This is going to be a 12-inch sleeve, and that's what I have marked here. So this is showing the location of that sleeve. So we're going to slide it in right to the end, and it'll stop right here. But before we slide that sleeve in, we have another one further down. Let's go take a look at that. Here's our station at 53 inches. You will notice that we have an 8-inch sleeve, and that is marked here. So we're going to first slide down an 8-inch sleeve and stop it right here. I've written down 49 inches. Because as we push this sleeve into the spar, we want it to stop at the 49-inch mark. Because half of 8 inches is 4, 4 and 49 is 53. So after we put this sleeve in, then we'll put the first 12-inch sleeve at the end. Now we have one more sleeve which we'll put in from the other end. We'll slide it in from this end. Let's take a look at that. And our last sleeve is at the station 101, 101 inches from the inboard end. And that is going to be another 12-incher. And it's going to go right here. But since this end is much closer to our other end, we'll slide it in this way and stop it at 37 inches from the other end. And it will sit right here. Now these sleeves go into all of the spars, the 2.5-inch spar and the 1.5-inch spar at the other side. And of course we have to do this for both wings. These inner sleeves, of course, strengthen the spar. And notice that each of these sleeves were centered on our stations, and that's because these stations are going to be where we have cross members attaching, and so that will thicken the wall for the hardware and make it stronger in those areas. So as we prepare the spars, these will remind us that we need to first insert those sleeves at these very specific locations before we continue. So let's get started with our wing. We'll do one wing at a time. Now we need 2 spars, the 2-inch and the 1.5. And what we're about to show here needs to be performed on both spars. The first step is to measure 5 inches from one of the ends and drill an 1/8-inch hole. Small hole like that. Then slide on a couple of your centering blocks, the ones for 2 inches. Slide on one here. We'll slide on one here. And then put a cleco through into the hole you just made. That. And what that does is lock down so that the spar cannot rotate anymore. Now what we're going to do is use this block and another one if you so desire and create a line all the way down. In fact, I'm going to go start at the other end. Let's take a look. Now you can see the center line, probably a little hard to see, but basically by holding your pen in the middle and just sliding the pipe by. If I had one more hand, I'd hold the pen. And you can make a very nice line down the entire length of the pipe very quickly and very accurately. Now we need one on the other side. Now we come back to the other end and simply rotate 90 degrees. And what that allows us to do is to use our pen to mark 180 degrees the other side and simply create a line on the other side. So basically we need 2 lines 180 degrees from each other. The line really only needs to be made at or around the stations that we drew, the 4 stations. But if you want to draw it the entire length, that's perfectly fine too. So prepare both spars, the 2-inch and the 1.5-inch, both with lines on opposite sides. Those lines are going to come in real handy in a not too distant future. Now the next step is to mark all 4 stations. So here's our 53 mark, and you're going to mark that where it crosses your center line on both sides. So flip it around and mark it. And then move down and get all 4 stations, 53, 101, etc. And after you mark them, one way as a sanity check that you got them in the same spot is to put your little block over, look for the mark, and then spin it around and find the mark in it. So that way you know you got it at the exact same spot on both sides. Our next step is to insert our sleeves. Now, of course, you got to create these first. Every spar is going to have 3 sleeves. Check your plans. 2 12-inchers and 1 8-inch. These are 1/8 smaller. So in other words, for a 2-inch, this is 1 7/8 inches. And we need to cut it to the proper length. In this case, the first one we're going to insert is 8 inches. And we want to really check that they are nice and smooth. What you don't want is one of these to be tight, because believe me, they will get stuck and you will never get them out, and that's a bad thing. You're going to end up having to throw away a tube. So assuming you have deburred and cleaned up the ends, and be careful about using tubing cutters. Tubing cutters do distort the ends and will give you problems with operations like this. So a chop saw, band saw is easier on the edge as far as crushing it, deforming it. But if you find that they are tight, you're going to need to polish them off, be it with some fine sandpaper, spin it around on a sandpaper belt, polish it, whatever it takes, but you definitely want to make sure it's this simple to go through, this easy to go through. It's very simple. Now, how far down does our first sleeve or insert go? Well, if you look at your stations, you will notice that at station 53, we have an 8-inch insert to go down. Let's go review that. Here is our station 53. We have the mark we made, and then remember we labeled this for an 8-inch sleeve. And this is where we want to push the sleeve down until it ends right here. So we'll be pushing it down and stopping it right here. Now the critical number is right here, 49 inches. So I am going to use a tape measure to push that sleeve down until I get 49 inches of tape into the pipe, which will stop it right here. So you want to do this carefully. You don't want to push it too fast, otherwise you have to go to the other end and push it back if you overshoot the runway, so to speak. So I'm going to start with my 8-inch sleeve in the end and push, 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 push. I'm going to, catch the lip with my tape measure and stop when I see 49 inches at the very end of the tube. Let's go do that. All right. Right there. Now I'm going to visually look down there and make sure it went all of the way. Another great way to push it is with one of your 1/2-inch tubings that you're going to use for ribs later on, and mark 49 inches, and you can definitely feel it when it touches. Or you can push it with this, either way. Now, once you have it like that, do not shake your tube around anymore. We don't want it shuffling around. We want it to sit at that 49 position. So I'm going to carefully set my tube back in the fixture. Now we know the tube is sitting right in here, and here's our mark. I am going to center punch that and then drill a 1/8 inch hole and insert a cleco. This will prevent that sleeve from moving from this point on. Now that sleeve will not move any longer. Let's move to the left down to station 101. And what we're going to find is that we have the need for a 12-incher. Now this one we're going to insert from this end because it's only 37 inches from this other end rather than going all the way from that end. So we're going to perform the same operation, slide a sleeve down to here, then we will punch and drill with the 1/8 inch cleco to hold this one in place. And here's our 12-incher. Confirm that it moves nice and free. and then send it down 37 inches. And there's the cleco for our 12-incher at station 101. And now we go all the way back down to the root end where our last 12-inch sleeve is to be inserted. And we save the easy one for last. So this will be a 12-incher. And it goes even. And then we drill through our hole that we previously made and cleco. Clamp. Now, with the clecos still on, you want to turn it upside down so the clecos are pointing down, and then punch and drill the opposite side precisely with an 8-inch hole. And you might ask, well, how do you set it down on top of the clecos? They stick out pretty far. We'll take a look. If you simply drill a 3/4 hole at each station, you will find that it is no problem to be able to invert the spar and set it down inside the hole so that you can drill on the other side. Now, we should verify that we have 4 holes, one at each station, including the one at the very end. 1 1/8-inch hole at each station on both sides. And our bottom side right now has the clecos in it to keep our sleeves from moving. Our next step is to open up all of these 4 holes to 3/16 of an inch, and then open them up to 1/4 inch. Then we're going to turn it over and open the other side, the holes, 3/16 and then 1/4 inch. So what we want is a 1/4 inch hole all the way through by enlarging the existing holes we have. After we make them 1/4 inch all the way through, we should put a temporary bolt through there just in case the sleeve wants to shift around. Now it shouldn't, because usually when you drill there's a tiny burr in there that keeps it from moving. But feel free, after enlarging a 1/4 inch, to put a temporary bolt through there. And when you're done, it should look something like this. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have no sleeve down here, so no need for a bolt. This tube is now finished, and we should proceed now to do the same operation on the other rear spar, 1.5 inch instead of 2-inch tube. And to review, our rear spar is 1.5 inches. At 5 inches, we make a small hole and cleco on one of our centering blocks. And then at each station, we make sure we have the top line that lines up with our original hole. And of course, we make this line on both sides, 180 degrees around. At the station, you really don't have to do it the entire length unless you want to. Each station, all 4 stations, so our center line, both top and bottom. Then our next step is to take our inserts, and then follow the same principle. We have an 8-inch here, and then at station number 101 we have a 12-inch, and then finally at the very beginning we have a 12-inch that goes in here.